Over thousands of years, people from across virtually every culture have developed various divination practices to gain insight into questions or unknown situations. Are all of these people misguided, or is there some truth to this occult practice? Hi everyone, welcome to the first video of this channel where I examine psi phenomena through experimentation and analysis. Today I'm conducting an experiment to evaluate the credibility of divination. I will use tarot and oracle cards to try to gain insight into concealed excerpts of text, investigating whether these instruments can truly reveal hidden information. Some background first. Divination can be viewed as a form of communication between the reader and what we might call a higher source. Now, what the nature of this source is a tremendously important question, but it falls outside the scope of our discussion today. So let's continue to focus on the process for now. So the reader submits an inquiry to the source, which presumably understands the question, and responds using the divination tools as a kind of language. The reader then attempts to decode this message by interpreting the symbols of the instruments she's using. Interpreting a divination outcome can be challenging because the complex, abstract, and multifaceted nature of the symbols in any divination tool can yield a wide range of valid interpretations. For example, if the oracle deck we're working with today yields the outcome we see on the screen, Uranus and Taurus in the second house, any of the corresponding translations of this outcome may be the appropriate one. In a typical reading, background information about the situation informs the interpretation. However, in this experiment, we will lack that context, making any outcome potentially valid. Therefore, we won't approach our central question by trying to determine the precise content of a concealed text through analyzing the divination outcomes. Rather, we will complete the divination acts, then reveal the hidden text, and finally, analyze the divination outcomes to see if we can reasonably ascribe at least one interpretation to the corresponding text excerpt. If we can successfully establish a clear connection between the divination results and the revealed text, we will consider this as evidence that supports the credibility of divination. Let me provide a comprehensive overview of the method at this time. In preparation for this exercise, I visited my local library and bought a handful of magazines that vary in scope and subject. I enlisted my sister's help and asked her to select 10 text samples that meet the following criteria from any of these magazines. The sample has to be between 1 and 10 sentences, it has to convey at least one central idea, subject, or message. It must be content-rich, meaning that the text is imbued with notable details, such as emotions, expressions, ideas, or undercurrents, or it discusses notable actions and events. And by notable, I mean things like enjoy, transform, protect, bewitch, as opposed to, for example, just jump, eat, and run. And lastly, it could address any topic, including technical, persuasive, etc. I asked her to seal each sample in an envelope, and the envelopes were then numbered so that I could refer to them directly in my reading. And essentially, for each envelope, I will ask the two tools that I'm working with today the same question, which is to summarize the hidden text. Let me elaborate on the two card decks I'm using before we go any further. The first deck is an oracle set created by Monty Farber called Karma Cards. This deck employs the language of astrological placements in a person's birth chart to provide a response to the reader's question, using the planet, sign, house interpretation technique. For those of you who are not familiar with astrology, first of all, bear with me. Second of all, a birth chart is a diagram that shows the position of celestial bodies, collectively known as planets in astrology, at the moment of a person's birth. Each planet symbolizes a different part of your personality and life experience. You might be familiar with the sun sign, for example, but there are various other planets that are believed to be able to describe a person's character. Each of these planets occupies a specific zodiac sign, and its interpretation is filtered through the characteristics of the sign it occupies. The 12 houses are determined by your time of birth and indicate specific areas of life where planetary energies manifest. So, by analyzing where planets are located in the zodiac signs and astrological houses, we gain valuable insight into a person's unique psychosocial makeup. For our purposes, the language of the planet sign house system is valuable because it's just that. It's a language that facilitates communication between the reader and the source of this information. As I've aforementioned, that's what any divination method amounts to, really. So why is this the language with which we're choosing to communicate? Because the various combinations that this specific deck can form allow it to communicate a variety of nuanced and specific messages. As specific as you'll get with such abstract tools anyway, and this will be helpful as we may encounter several different topics and themes. So, in summary, here's how I will use this deck. I'll ask the instrument to summarize the text excerpt in the envelope, and I'll meditate on the question. Then I'll shuffle the deck 10 times. When I'm done, I'm going to select one of each card, a planet card, a sign card, and a house card. Specifically, I'm going to select the first of each card that I encounter. So, if this were the outcome of my shuffle, this would be the planet card I select, this is my house card, and this is my sign card. If I encounter 2 cards of the same category consecutively, I will take both of those cards, but no more than those 2. So for example, if this were the outcome of my shuffle, this would be my house card, this would be my sign card, and I would take the first 2 of these 3 planet cards. And we would consider the outcome using both planet cards. However, if my shuffle results in 2 or more categories with 2 or more cards back to back, I will reshuffle until at a maximum there's only 1 category with 2 cards in that position. So for example, if this were the outcome of my shuffle, I have 2 back-to-back sign cards, so we'll take that to begin with. And then I have 1 house card, but then I see I have 2 back-to-back planet cards. This would form just too many combinations of messages, and it would confuse the outcome. It would be pretty unhelpful. So we would just reshuffle this until, like I said, at a maximum, we only end up with 1 column that has 2 consecutive cards. And when I'm done, I will reveal the arrangement, so it'll look something like this. I will supplement the summary from the Oracle deck with a standard tarot deck, which is the second tool I'll be using here. A standard tarot deck consists of 78 cards divided into 2 main sections, the Major Arcana and the Minor Arcana. The Major Arcana is comprised of 22 cards, each depicting a significant archetype or theme along the traditional hero's journey, or fool's journey as it's known in tarot. The Minor Arcana consists of 56 cards divided into 4 suits, which represent the aspects of life we encounter in many different spiritual practices. These include Pentacles, which refers to earth energy and addresses finances, resources, and other practical matters. Swords, which represents air energy and concerns issues of the rational mind and logical thinking. Cups, which represents the water energy and concerns emotions. And Wands, which pertains to fire energy and refers to passion, drive, inspiration, and charm. A tarot deck is valuable because the breadth and depth of its symbolism allow it to convey messages a little less abstractly and more directly than an oracle deck. The 2 of them together should give us an acceptably comprehensive view of what we are trying to divine. There are multiple ways you can organize a tarot reading. What I'll do is I'll ask the same question of this deck, which is to summarize the text in the envelope. I'll shuffle the deck fully 5 times, and I will randomly pull out 2 cards. I will not be taking reversals. After I'm finished with both the oracle and the tarot, I'm going to reveal the text excerpt in the envelope. I'm then going to move on and do all the remaining text samples, and after I'm done, we'll come back and analyze the outcomes to see how well the two tools did in describing the text. For the analysis, I'm going to depend primarily on ChatGPT and a website called astrology.com. I'm using these tools to facilitate articulation, standardize responses, and divorce myself from the interpretation as much as possible so you don't have to take my word for it. The ChatGPT prompt for the oracle will typically be summarize the effects and outcomes of some planet in some sign in some house by breaking it down into its constituent parts. For the tarot, it's going to say analyze this spread in a tarot reading by breaking down its full symbolism, card 1 and card 2. I will refer to astrology.com for supplementary purposes, for example, if it imparts a specific point more clearly than ChatGPT. To determine the accuracy of our results, we will ask if we can reasonably ascribe at least one interpretation of the instrument's outcomes to any of the following aspects of the text. The tone, which is the author's attitude found in the writing, for example, sarcastic, sincere, dreamy, etc. The mood, which is the way the reader is made to feel when reading a text. The letter of the text, that's the actual words that appear in the text. The central idea, which is the main message conveyed. Or the text connotation, which are the meanings and associations suggested by the text. In the discussion portion, we will simply consider if a link can be logically and sensibly established between the divination results and the revealed text. Ultimately, each result will be evaluated for specificity and precision. That is, how clearly and unequivocally can the divination outcome be attributed to the text. The results will be judged qualitatively and ranked as poor, acceptable, good, very good, great, or excellent, based on how unambiguously they apply to the respective excerpts. We are characterizing things very subjectively, and the challenges and limitations of that approach are not lost on me, but we're just wetting our feet in this first experiment and just having a little bit of fun, so let's just see what we find. My hypothesis is that divination outcomes will be judged as significantly more accurate than would be expected by chance, with at least 6 scores falling in the very good or higher categories. If you'd like to see the full, unedited experiment, that exists in a standalone video that you can access from the link in the description box. The subsequent sections of this video will discuss and analyze experiment outcomes. I will introduce the divination results and text excerpt for each sample prior to analyzing the outcome, so you'll have that context, but if you want to see the entire experiment, you can do that by accessing the link in the description. Okay, so the way we're going to do the analysis is on the left side of the screen here, we see the text excerpt and the divination outcomes. The purple box contains the text. In the top right, you can see the oracle outcome, and underneath that is the tarot outcome. On the right side of the screen, you'll be able to see the ChatGPT interpretations, and if I reference astrology.com, you'll see that on the screen as well. And we'll just get started with this first example that we see on the screen here. Okay, so for this first excerpt, we got experience the exclusive world of yacht-style cruising with Atlas Ocean Voyages. Explore captivating destinations on remote expeditions and alluring cruises with fewer than 200 fellow travelers. Expect impeccable service in an elegant yet relaxed ambience where even the smallest details are carefully considered and included. And for the oracle, we got Venus and Capricorn in the 4th house. So we typed in our oracle prompt into ChatGPT, identify the effects and outcomes of Venus and Capricorn in the 4th house by breaking it down into its constituent parts. And ChatGPT tells us that Venus has to do, among other things, with our pleasures and material comforts. Capricorn has to do, among other things, with ambition. And the fourth house has to do, among other things, with our personal foundations and our sense of comfort and nurturing. And then what ChatGPT does is it takes a handful of the various things that each of these elements represents and it generates some potential combined outcomes. None of which seem like they apply to our text, right? But that's okay. This list of combined effects is not exhaustive. What we can do is go back to our foundational definitions and just do what ChatGPT did, which is combine the individual symbols to form a cohesive thought. By doing that, we can see that another way to interpret this spread is something to the effect of an ambitious approach to what we find pleasurable, or an ambitious approach to our material comforts, especially as it pertains to our sense of being nurtured. If that sounds like a stretch, or if it's not clear what that means, let's look at astrology.com, which tells us that among the negative characteristics of Venus in Capricorn is a materialistic nature, i.e. an ambitious approach to what we find pleasurable. So putting it all together simply, one valid translation of the oracle spread is materialistic, that is Venus in Capricorn, personal comforts, fourth house. Is that a good way to summarize this text? Does that theme describe the content of this text sample in any way? I think so, right? This advertiser specifically distinguishes itself from other cruise lines by highlighting the luxurious services that they offer. The text mentions an exclusive world, suggesting rarity and privilege, as well as impeccable service, suggesting high standards and attention to detail, again reinforcing the luxury aspect. And the idea of fewer than 200 fellow travelers evokes intimacy and personalized service, referring to those fourth house themes. And the phrase elegant yet relaxed ambience again speaks directly to comfort as a theme. So it's not just any type of cruising. It's a decadent yacht-style cruising, right? There's an overt materialistic quality to this advertisement. And materialism is something captured by the tarot as well. In the tarot, we see the Devil and the Six of Swords. So let's see what ChatGPT has to say about this spread. We type in our tarot prompt, analyze this spread in a tarot reading by breaking down its full symbolism, the Devil and the Six of Swords. And ChatGPT tells us that the Devil represents, among other things, materialism, and the Six of Swords represents, among other things, travel. So putting two and two together, it seems that one valid interpretation of these two cards is a materialistic travel experience, which is essentially the main takeaway of the text, right? So it looks like both the tarot and the oracle did a good job of IDing a key aspect of the hidden text excerpt, which is that it prominently regards materialistic personal comforts or a materialistic travel experience. Now, let me be clear. If I saw these two placements in a typical reading where I didn't have any access to the situation or text being divined, is this the conclusion I would have come to? Probably not. I would have probably said the same cookie-cutter interpretation that ChatGPT provides for us, which is that this text probably has something to do with moving on, Six of Swords, from materialistic temptations, the Devil, by developing a practical emotional foundation, Venus and Capricorn in the fourth house. But I'll remind you, our plan today was not to determine if divination is real, so to say, by identifying the precise content of the text. We're addressing that central question by asking if it looks plausible that something was communicated with us. Did the source understand our question and relay a relevant response? If it did, at least one of its outcome interpretations would relate to the concealed text. In this case, I believe that criterion was met. As I've argued, I do believe that a good faith effort was made to communicate with us. However, one sample isn't enough to arrive to that conclusion, so let's check out this next one. Text number 2 reads, "A tailored investment approach focused on your best interests. Everything we are, we become by focusing on the needs of our clients, the need for integrated financial and estate planning, the need for objective, client-customized investment advice, the need for forward-thinking trustee services, including access to New Hampshire's trust advantages, the need for a nimble, honest, and trustworthy partner for life, a fiduciary, proudly independent for over 135 years, all to help you live the life you want to live." And for the oracle, we got Venus and Pisces in the second house. So we have our prompt in ChatGPT starting out with Venus in the planet position. Identify the effects and outcomes of Venus and Pisces in the second house by breaking it down into its constituent parts. And we can see that, again, Venus has to do, among other things, with values, relationships, and material possessions. Pisces has to do with compassion, and the second house has to do with personal finances and material possessions. The combined interpretations, again, aren't very helpful, but if we come down to this overall outcome, we see Venus and Pisces in the second house encourages a unique blend of emotional depth and idealism regarding material matters. It often leads to a creative and compassionate approach to finances and possessions. Does this summary apply to the text? I think absolutely it does, right? The text is titled A Tailored Investment Approach Focused on Your Best Interests. So right off the bat, the theme of finance, as captured by Venus and more obviously the second house, applies very well. The Piscean themes of compassion and service are also very present in the text sample. They state, everything we are, we become by focusing on the needs of our clients. Additionally, the phrases client customized investment advice and a trustworthy partner for life highlight the service-oriented nature of this company. Simply put, they are a fiduciary. What is a fiduciary in simple terms? Fiduciaries are persons or organizations that act on behalf of others and are required to put the client's interests ahead of their own, with a duty to preserve good faith and trust. So Venus and Pisces in the second house seems very apt. Does Mars and Pisces change the meaning much? Let's check it out. So ChatGPT tells us that when Mars is in Pisces in the second house, several effects and outcomes can manifest, including a drive for financial security. There may be a strong motivation to achieve financial stability, often driven by emotional needs or creative aspirations. So changing the planet doesn't change the interpretation much in this case. For the record, the foundational difference between Venus versus Mars and Pisces in the second house has to do with the difference between the feminine element Venus versus the masculine element Mars, i.e. the difference between attracting wealth, Venus, and pursuing it, Mars. Either way, both planets work fine with regard to capturing the content of the text excerpt. So all in all, a valid interpretation of this oracle spread is the desire or drive for financial stability, that's Venus or Mars in the second house, imbued with a deep service-oriented mindset, that's Pisces. Now, what about the tarot? In the tarot, we see Two of Cups and Three of Pentacles. ChatGPT tells us that Two of Cups is about partnerships, and because it's the Cups element, these are partnerships of a deep emotional nature. Three of Pentacles is about teamwork and collaboration, and because it's the Pentacles element, it represents the material aspect of teamwork, emphasizing skill sets, etc. So in the combined interpretation, this one probably applies best, right? Emotional and practical balance. The Two of Cups emphasizes the emotional aspect, while the Three of Pentacles focuses on the practical. Together they encourage balancing emotional fulfillment with tangible goals, suggesting that a strong emotional foundation can enhance collaborative efforts. I feel like I don't have to do too much explaining here, right? That's essentially the main takeaway of the text. So I think this one knocked it out of the ballpark for both the oracle and the tarot. And I gotta say, having these two samples back to back was helpful because both of them had to do with material or financial concerns, right? And even between these two, we see how our instruments captured the nuance between the two texts. The first sample was about overt materialism, and sample number 2 was more about level-headed money management, and I think our outcomes captured that nuance. Text number 3 says, be kind to yourself. Seeking therapy is a sign of strength, not of weakness. Free yourself from the stigma that can be associated with seeking mental health care. Starting therapy is a sign that you're taking ownership of your narrative and prioritizing your mental health. It takes a lot of bravery, and it's something to be proud of. And for the oracle, we got Venus and Scorpio in the 8th house. Now, this is our third Venus spread, so we should be pretty familiar with what it means, right? Basically, Venus, as one of what's called the benefic planets in astrology, is about all the good things in life: love, beauty, wealth, harmony, etc. Scorpio is known for its intensity, depth, passion, and transformative qualities, often leading to deep emotional connections. And the 8th house, as the natural house of Scorpio, doubles down on these scorpionic themes, so it's all about transformation and psychological depth. And because these themes of depth and psychology were captured by both the sign and house cards, many of the combined analyses are pretty spot on. We see emotional depth, transformational love, and healing and regeneration. And I think that one's the most applicable here, right? Venus in the 8th house can bring about themes of healing through love, with the potential to transform personal wounds into sources of strength and insight. And then if we jump to astrology.com, one of the keywords for Venus in Scorpio is psychological. So putting it all together, this oracle spread is about a psychological approach to transformation. And I think it's abundantly clear how relevant this outcome is to the text sample. The text is urging the reader to usher in transformation by enhancing self-compassion, right? Be kind to yourself, breaking stigmas, and taking ownership of your narrative. All of these are 8th house themes, and the vehicle with which to accomplish this transformation is by seeking therapy, i.e. embracing psychological depth. That's Venus in Scorpio. So I think this one was another knockout for the oracle. How about the tarot? ChatGPT says 6 of Pentacles is about generosity. This card may indicate a time when you are either in a position to help others or receiving help yourself. And the 8 of Cups often signifies emotional withdrawal, abandonment, and the search for deeper fulfillment. In the combined interpretation, we see transition in relationships. You may be experiencing a shift in how you give and receive support in your life. Perhaps you've realized that certain relationships or situations are no longer reciprocating your generosity, prompting a need to walk away in search of more fulfilling connections. Does that apply to this text? Again, I think it absolutely does, right? 6 of Pentacles says, be kind to yourself. And 8 of Cups says, free yourself from the stigma. And if you look at the imagery of these cards, the message comes through particularly strongly. So I think that was another solid one for both the oracle and the tarot. Text number 4 reads, stay curious and pay attention to the wild plants you love. The patterns and plant combinations you enjoy in the wild will give you ideas that you can interpret and adapt for your own garden compositions. And the oracle yielded Uranus and Virgo in the 1st house. According to ChatGPT, Uranus represents, among other things, originality and unconventional approaches. Virgo represents attention to detail and a methodical approach. And the 1st house governs how individuals present themselves. So, combining everything together, we see over here critical yet visionary. People with Uranus and Virgo in the 1st house might possess a critical eye, analyzing themselves and their surroundings while also being open to new ideas and improvements. Let's see if astrology.com descriptors help us drive the point home before we go back to the text. In astrology.com, we see that some of the keywords for Uranus and Virgo include fastidious and scrutinizing. What does fastidious mean? According to dictionary.com, it means very attentive to and concerned about accuracy and detail. What does scrutinizing mean? To scrutinize means to examine something in detail with careful or critical attention. Synonyms for scrutinizing include curious. How does this idea fit into the text excerpt? Well, it says right there, stay curious and pay attention. So with Virgo, you have the attentive element, and with Uranus, you are applying that scrutinizing eye in an unconventional way, which I feel is a very good way of characterizing what this text is about. What drives the spread home, actually, is the house card. Why do I say that? Well, this text is in second-person voice, right? The author is urging me, the reader, to be attentive, which is why it's appropriate that we have the first house in the house position, since the first house represents the self, the identity, and how one presents themselves to the world, as we discussed. So all in all, this oracle spread is saying, embrace a critical yet unconventional self-concept, which I think is an apt way of describing the text subject. Now let's see what the tarot has to say. ChatGPT says that the Two of Pentacles has to do, among other things, with adaptability. And the Nine of Cups symbolizes emotional fulfillment and joy. So in the combined analysis, we see a handful of different interpretations that combine the ways that these two energies can interact with one another. And we don't find an exact one to align with our reading, which is not surprising, but that's okay. We don't need to have the system spoon-feed the precise analysis to us each time. You know, we can acceptably interpret the spread as adapting, Two of Pentacles, something that you enjoy, Nine of Cups. That idea shows up verbatim in the text, right? It says right there, the patterns and plant combinations you enjoy can give you ideas you can adapt and interpret, etc. So overall, I think this was another very good reading. Let's move on to the next one. Text number 5 reads, disappear for a while. Nothing takes the edge off a long, dark winter quite like seeing light at the end of the tunnel, with miles of wide open spaces, warm, clear water, and endless sunshine. There's no brighter spot on Earth than the Florida Keys in Key West. It's never too soon to start planning your escape. And in the oracle, we got Uranus and Scorpio in the 8th and 7th houses. Have we seen something like this spread before? Yeah, in number 3, which was about transforming through self-love, right? There we had Venus in Scorpio in the 8th house. So what does Uranus, for the planet card, do for this interpretation? Let's look at ChatGPT. So Uranus, we've already learned, is about unconventionality, right? And I'll emphasize for this example that it promotes freedom along with that originality. Scorpio, as we saw, has to do with transformation, as does the 8th house. And for this example, I'll also underscore that both Scorpio and the 8th house also have to do with mysteries and the hidden aspects of life. And in the combined effects, we see transformation and change. There may be a strong desire for transformation, and then it goes on to say, especially in areas related to intimacy and shared resources. In the overall outcome, again, we see the combination of Uranus and Scorpio in the 8th house suggests a life marked by intense transformation, a desire for emotional authenticity, and a unique approach to intimacy and shared resources. While the reference to intimacy and shared resources is understandable, since both Scorpio and the 8th house are connected to those themes, it doesn't need to be the case that every single detail of the interpretation has to apply to the text for an outcome to be considered appropriate. We'll see shortly how the themes of transformation and authenticity do relate to the text. Before we look at the text, though, let's look at astrology.com, which tells us that Uranus in Scorpio can also present as a bit of a covert energy. So it harkens back to what we saw at the beginning with that scorpionic energy representing the hidden aspects of life. Okay, so we're seeing two themes emerge that both seem applicable to the text. Number 1 is transformation. It's a theme that manifests with a combination of Scorpio and the 8th house. Again, we've seen that combination before in text number 3. In text number 3, though, we were transforming with the power of self-love and kindness. That's why Venus was in the position of the planet card. Here we're transforming through Uranian means, i.e. seeking freedom, in this case from our surroundings, or as the text says, escaping. Right? The text describes an anxious and bleak environment as indicated by the phrase, "nothing takes the edge off a long dark winter," and it urges the reader to seek relaxation and vibrancy as indicated by the imagery of wide open spaces, warm, clear water, and endless sunshine. So if the oracle is interpreted as breaking free, Uranus, in order to usher in transformation, Scorpio in the 8th house, we can agree that it applies to the text excerpt based on what we've just talked about. If we use a slightly different interpretation from astrology.com, i.e. covert, we would translate this spread as something to the effect of a covert, Uranus and Scorpio, approach to transformation, 8th house. Does that apply to the text? I think it does an excellent job of identifying the nuance of this excerpt, actually, because we're not just planning a vanilla family vacation here, right? As the text says, we're disappearing and we're escaping, right? So Uranus and Scorpio in the 8th house, I think, does a great job of identifying the main takeaway of this text. The 7th house as a secondary house card signifier here is still relevant because among the many significations of the 7th house is travel and foreign lands. So the comprehensive message from the oracle, if we were to use the 7th house, would be something to the effect of breaking free, Uranus, and ushering in transformation, Scorpio, through travel, 7th house. And it looks like transformation is what the tarot is picking up on as well. In the tarot, we got Death and the 5 of Cups. ChatGPT says death is about transformation and change and letting go of what no longer serves you. 5 of Cups is about loss and grief, as well as a perspective shift. While it highlights the pain of loss, it also invites reflection on what is still present. Often 2 upright cups remain in the card imagery, suggesting hope and potential despite the 3 cups that have fallen. And so in the combined analysis, we have moving forward. Ultimately, this combination encourages taking steps to let go of what no longer serves you, allowing for personal growth and the potential for renewed hope. This is another one I don't think I have to expound on too much. That's basically the main takeaway of the text, right? And again, I urge you not to fixate on the fact that this text isn't about personal growth, right? The interpretation doesn't have to be word for word applicable. The overarching themes of transforming sadness applies pretty clearly. Text number 6 reads, "I feel a hypersensitivity in every way, visually, to sound, to people's feelings. It's been one of the main things I deal with in therapy." And in the oracle, we got Venus again, this time in Leo in the 9th and 4th houses. So let's start by looking at Venus in Leo in the 4th house, since we've encountered the 4th house before as well, so we're a little more familiar with its significations. So as we've learned, Venus has to do with love, beauty, pleasure, and harmony, our desires and values, etc. Leo has to do with creativity, confidence, expressiveness, drama, warmth, generosity, leadership, and authority. And the 4th house, as we know, has to do with our emotional foundations and our sense of security and comfort. And in the combined interpretations, we don't see anything that looks like it applies to our text, right? We see here loving atmosphere. The presence of Venus in Leo can create a warm, loving, and vibrant home environment. No, that doesn't look like it applies. Nurturing relationships. Family life may be characterized by expressive love. No. Creativity at home. Desire for recognition. Dramatic conflicts, attachment issues. No. Okay, that's okay. Let's look at astrology.com. In astrology.com, we see that the positive keywords for Venus and Leo include energetic, friendly, fun-loving, joyful, and warm. And the negative keywords for Venus in Leo include exaggerating, possessive, pushy, show-off, and self-absorbed. None of those applies to the text, right? Venus in Leo is specifically what the speaker is not, right? She's not feeling joyful or warm, or for that matter, self-absorbed or anything like that. Here's the thing. The sign card in this spread is just incorrect. Leo energy simply doesn't fit into this reading. What does fit in, though, is Venus and the 4th house, the planet card and the house card. I have this other window open here where I just asked ChatGPT to identify the effects and outcomes of Venus just in the 4th house by breaking it down into its constituent parts. And we see here psychological aspects, right? Including inner peace, right? Venus in this position can indicate a quest for inner peace, often achieved through nurturing oneself and others, as well as sensitivity. An enhanced sensitivity to emotional environments, these individuals may be very attuned to the moods of those around them. Isn't that exactly what this text is about? Right? The speaker feels a hypersensitivity to her environment, including to people's feelings, and she's addressing this issue through nurturing herself, i.e. therapy. So Venus in the 4th house is legit. What about Venus in the 9th house? As we can see here, the 9th house is associated with higher learning, philosophy, spirituality, travel, and exploration. It also relates to beliefs, ethics, and the search for meaning in life. Essentially, it has to do with the expansion of horizons, both mentally and physically. So, Venus in the 9th house can manifest as a love for knowledge. Individuals may develop a passion for learning and exploring philosophical or spiritual subjects. They may find beauty in knowledge and seek to understand deeper truths. Does that apply to the text? Yes, right? The speaker is seeking therapy. And at the risk of being obtuse, but making sure to drive the point home, I asked ChatGPT to summarize what you can expect from therapy. And what do we see here? Number 3, self-discovery. You'll have the opportunity to gain a deeper understanding of yourself, your patterns, and your emotions, right? If we go back to the Venus in the 9th house screen, we can see right here again, deeper truths, right? So it seems that Venus in the 4th house and Venus in the 9th house apply to this text. However, as we discussed, the Leo energy is inconsistent. Some quick math here. There are 10 planet cards in this oracle deck, 12 sign cards, and 12 house cards. So the probability of getting all 3 cards quote-unquote correct, which is to say all 3 cards formed a cohesive idea that applies to the text, right? The probability of getting all 3 of those cards correct is 1 over 10 multiplied by 1 over 12 multiplied by 1 over 12, which is 1 over 1440, which is about 0.069%. So what this number means is that if the results of this divination act were based on pure random chance, we would see 3 correct cards 0.069% of the time. But that's what we've been seeing all along, right? We don't have enough samples to make this number statistically significant, but we have seen 5 trials now with 3 out of 3 cards together forming a cohesive idea that is apropos to the concealed text. This is the first time we only got 2 out of 3 correct, right? So that suggests that this tool isn't just operating by pure chance. Okay, let's take a look at the tarot. In the tarot, we got the Wheel of Fortune and the Knight of Pentacles. According to ChatGPT, the Wheel of Fortune represents the cyclical nature of life. It signifies the ups and downs, the ebb and flow of fortune, and the inevitability of change. The Knight of Pentacles is about hard work and diligence. The Knight of Pentacles embodies a strong work ethic, practicality, and a methodical approach to tasks. This Knight is focused on building and maintaining stability. And when it says this Knight, it's differentiating it from the Knights of the other suits, such as, for example, the Knight of Swords, which is about swift action and assertiveness. Alternatively, the Knight of Pentacles teaches about the value of patience and perseverance, emphasizing that consistent effort will yield results over time. Does that theme apply to this text? Yeah, right? It's a short piece of text with two main ideas. One is experiencing this issue, hypersensitivity, and the other is dealing with it. The experience of dealing with the issue is what the tarot caught on to. In summary, you're persevering, Knight of Pentacles, despite the ebbs and flows of life, or through the ebbs and flows of life, right? Wheel of Fortune. We see here in ChatGPT, this spread encourages you to embrace changes with a steady hand, highlighting that while you may encounter cycles of fortune, your diligent efforts will help guide your path through them. Text number 7 reads, over the years, J.A. Woolam's commitment to innovation has resulted in revolutionary breakthroughs in ellipsometry and has produced more than 180 patents. We continue to advance our industry-leading tools and technology to offer unmatched speed and accuracy. Our worldwide network of highly trained representatives educate and offer unparalleled, reliable service and personal support to our global customers, so they are able to get the most out of their ellipsometer. J.A. Woolam is the undisputed leader in providing spectroscopic ellipsometry solutions, then and now. And in the Oracle, we got Mars in Leo and Aquarius in the 5th house. Let's start with Mars and Aquarius first. I think that's the more obviously applicable energy here. And let's just look at the planet sign placement independent of the house position first, and I'll show you why shortly. Okay, so Mars and Aquarius. First of all, what is Mars? Mars is the masculine element, right? It's a malefic planet, meaning it governs the tougher aspects of life, right? Like conflict and aggression. But central to our reading today, it also rules energy and drive, as well as passion and motivation. Mars represents our energy, action, and assertiveness. It influences how we pursue our goals and assert ourselves in the world. It also embodies passion, desire, and our instinctual responses. It often drives our ambition and competitive nature. Aquarius has to do, among other things, with innovation and originality. Aquarius is known for its progressive and unconventional nature, emphasizing creativity and new ideas. So in the combined effects, we see innovative action. People with Mars and Aquarius tend to approach their goals with originality. They might pursue unconventional paths or think outside the box. We also see revolutionary ideas. People may become leaders in social movements or technological advancements, using their drive to champion new ideas. Do those themes apply to the text? Well, innovation and revolutionary are literally the first two keywords that show up in this text sample, right? The company also talks about being industry leading, doubling down on those themes of innovation. Ultimately, this excerpt is about breakthroughs and leaderships in technology. I don't think we have to do too much work here. I think it's patently clear how applicable Mars and Aquarius, with its emphasis on innovation and technological breakthroughs, is to the text excerpt, right? What does Mars and Leo tell us? So again, Mars rules action and energy, motivation and desire. Leo we've seen before too, right? It's associated with creativity and self-expression, as well as confidence and leadership. And in the combined interpretation, we see increased confidence. Individuals with Mars and Leo exude a strong sense of self-confidence, making them more assertive in pursuing their desires. We also see passionate pursuits. Mars and Leo can lead to passionate engagement in romantic relationships and personal projects. We also see leadership abilities. Individuals are likely to take charge in group settings, motivating others with their enthusiasm and vision. They may be seen as natural leaders. Do these themes apply to the text? Check out the proud and assertive tone of this sample, right? J.A. Woolam is not only an ellipsometry producer, they've ushered in, quote, revolutionary breakthroughs in their field. They not only have tools, they have industry-leading tools. Leaders, right? Leo. They not only offer speed and accuracy, they offer unmatched speed and accuracy, as well as highly trained representatives and unparalleled reliable services, right? They say they are the undisputed leader, right? So this is very characteristically Mars in Leo. We saw all the themes that we discovered earlier, right? Confidence, passion, leadership. So both Mars in Leo and Mars in Aquarius apply very well to this text. What about the fifth house? The fifth house in Vedic astrology has to do with creativity and artistic expression. This house governs all forms of creative expression, including art, music, and writing. It reflects one's artistic talents and the ability to innovate. It also has to do with intelligence and knowledge. The fifth house is linked to higher learning and intellectual pursuits. It represents how we acquire knowledge and our capacity for critical thinking. It goes without saying that both these themes apply very well to the text, right? We've already talked about innovation. And I think we can agree that intelligence is imbued in such scientific endeavors, right? The issue is, in traditional Western astrology, the fifth house still has to do with creativity, but that creativity is defined pretty exclusively as artistic expression. The elements of intelligence and innovation are not associated with the fifth house in the West, which is why I didn't want to look at the spread comprehensively in ChatGPT, since it uses the traditional Western astrological definitions and it doubles down too much on this idea of artistic expression. In this window, I typed in our comprehensive prompt to identify the effects and outcomes of Mars and Aquarius in the fifth house by breaking it down into its constituent parts, and we see that creative innovation is one of the combined outcomes. Mars and Aquarius in the fifth house can lead to highly innovative and unconventional creative expressions. Individuals may pursue unique artistic projects that break traditional boundaries. So it's not totally inapplicable to the text, right? But it also arguably focuses a little too much on artistic expression instead of innovation, which confuses the interpretation a bit. So, translating the spread comprehensively would yield something like a revolutionary drive, Mars and Aquarius, as it regards intellectual or innovative pursuits, fifth house. It can also be translated as a confident and passionate leadership, Mars in Leo, in intellectual or innovative pursuits, fifth house. Again, both are very good ways to summarize this text, I think. What about the tarot? In the tarot, we got the Four of Wands and the Three of Wands. ChatGPT says the Four of Wands represents foundation and stability. The imagery typically features a structure, like a house or archway, that symbolizes a strong foundation and a sense of belonging. It suggests that a solid base has been established. And the Three of Wands represents expansion and growth. This card signifies looking ahead and planning for the future. It often represents opportunities and the exploration of new horizons. So in the combined interpretations, we see celebrating foundations for future growth. The established stability of the Four of Wands supports the vision and planning represented by the Three of Wands. This suggests that you have created a solid base from which to explore new opportunities. Does that apply to the text? Take a look. Over the years, J.A. Woolam's commitment to innovation has resulted in revolutionary breakthroughs, right? Four of Wands, solid foundation. We continue to advance our industry-leading tools. Three of Wands, expansion, right? Then and now. So that's the part of the text that the tarot is speaking to. Overall, I think this was an excellent outcome for both the oracle and the tarot. I'm impressed with how well they did in identifying the text features, especially since this was such a technical excerpt. For text number 8, we got, throughout the British Isles, beautiful work is produced that reflects our heritage of traditional skills and techniques, abundance of raw materials, and colorful landscapes. And for the oracle, we got Jupiter in Cancer and Aries in the second house. Let's look at Jupiter in Cancer in the second house first. ChatGPT says Jupiter is associated with wealth and prosperity. Its placement indicates how one acquires wealth or resources, and it brings abundance, optimism, and generosity wherever it is placed. Cancer signifies the home and family. Cancer emphasizes security, home, family, and tradition, creating a strong attachment to one's roots and heritage. The second house governs personal finances, wealth, savings, and material possessions. It also shows how one earns a living, and it also has to do with family legacy and values. The second house represents family lineage, traditions, and the values passed down through generations. And in the combined interpretation, we see financial prosperity. Jupiter's exaltation in Cancer in the second house brings great potential for financial success and abundance. The native may be blessed with wealth or gain material resources through family or traditional values. We also see wealth from family or inheritance. Cancer's connection to home and family, combined with the second house of accumulated wealth, may indicate financial benefits through family assets, inheritance, or a supportive family background. Do those themes apply to this text? Absolutely, right? The text is about the abundance, Jupiter, of Great Britain, the homeland. That's where Cancer comes in. Cancer often speaks to the home in a broader metaphorical sense, i.e. your community, your nation, etc. And how are all these familial blessings channeled in this excerpt? Towards craftsmanship, i.e. producing material possessions, the second house. If you use the family, legacy, and values definition of the second house, it still speaks to the text excerpt. The spread would just be translated as something like familial abundance, Jupiter and Cancer, coming from your lineage and traditions, second house. So this one was a total knockout. I think this was the best oracle spread I've seen so far, to be honest, because this is such a small piece of text, and each of these cards form together to capture the main takeaway from this text so precisely. Jupiter in Aries is a little less relevant, but not entirely so. Let's check out ChatGPT. So we already know what Jupiter means, right? It brings optimism wherever it is placed. Aries is a fire sign associated with, among other things, enthusiasm and self-confidence. And the second house also has to do with speech and communication. This house is linked to how one communicates and the power of words. And so in the combined interpretation, we see confident communicator. Jupiter and Aries in the second house can make one, among other things, optimistic in their communication, and they may inspire others with their confident articulation of ideas. So in a completely separate window, independent of the astrological line of questioning, I asked ChatGPT to analyze the tone, the mood, the theme, and the main takeaway of this text. And we got that the tone is optimistic and appreciative, right? So it goes back to those themes of optimism. And the mood is inspirational and reflective, right? So Jupiter in Aries does speak to the tone and the mood of the text excerpt, while Jupiter in Cancer speaks more so to the text's main takeaway. The tarot was a little 50-50, unfortunately. In the tarot, we got Six of Cups and the Five of Swords. The Six of Cups has to do with nostalgia and memories. It can evoke feelings of joy associated with reconnecting with one's roots. So that ties in really well with the emotional connection to heritage and tradition that colors this text excerpt. The Five of Swords, though, has to do with some pretty ugly things. Conflict and defeat, ambition and ego, etc. So we don't even have to look at the combined interpretations here. The Five of Swords is just totally out of place for this reading. So it looks like we got only one out of the two cards right for the tarot this time. If you recall, for text number 6, we had an instance where we only got 2 out of the 3 oracle cards right. In this case, we only got 1 out of the 2 tarot correct. But that goes to show you can't knock them all out of the ballpark, right? Our tools are very limited. Relative to the task we're undertaking, we're approaching this stuff with some really primitive instruments, right? And that's why I'm doing this experiment. If we can establish the step 0 question, right? If we can say, you know what, it looks like there's some veracity to divination, then we can try to understand the phenomenon better and perhaps think of ways to engineer precision into the exercise. Find a way to make the communication channel less dependent on probabilistic outcomes of abstract symbols, right? Maybe. That sounds easier said than done. But anyways, it's worth pursuing. Text number 9 reads, the existing footprint of the 2,400 square foot house remained virtually the same, but the renovation removed awkward remnants of a 2-family conversion. The 4-bedroom, 3-bath home now boasts a sight line from the front foyer to the back door. This was made possible by reworking the existing pantry, now a full bath, removing a wall between the dining room and kitchen, and adding 26 square feet for a new back entry, a breakfast nook, and relocated access to the guest bedroom. Upstairs, removing back stairs allowed for a primary suite. The front bedroom gained a closet with space taken from the shared bath. And for the oracle, we got Neptune and Taurus in the 10th house. I'm going to start again with just the planet and sign placements. Looking at this outcome in ChatGPT, we see that Neptune has to do, among other things, with artistic and creative inspiration. Neptune inspires creative expression, often through music, art, and other forms of abstract creativity. Taurus has to do with practicality and groundedness. Taurus is an earth sign known for its stability, practicality, and focus on the material world. It seeks security, comfort, and tangible results. It also has to do with sensuality and appreciation of beauty. Taurus is ruled by Venus, emphasizing a love for beauty, luxury, and sensory pleasures. So, one of the combined outcomes is artistic vision manifested. This placement could foster the ability to manifest artistic or creative vision into tangible forms, like creating beautiful objects, spaces, or experiences that inspire others. Furthermore, astrology.com indicates that this placement makes one aesthetic-oriented, which I think is really apt because this excerpt is about a home renovation, right? So Neptune and Taurus is applicable to the reading. The planet and sign cards are correct. However, the 10th house, I'm not so sure. The 10th house has to do, among other things, with career and profession, which might speak to the very didactic tone of the text, with its objective language and focus on functionality. But I'm not that convinced, right? For the sake of rigor, I'll say we only got 2 out of the 3 cards correct in the oracle. What about the tarot? In the tarot, we got the 10 of Pentacles and the Devil. We see that the 10 of Pentacles has to do with family and legacy. The card is connected to family matters, often representing ancestral ties, traditions, and the idea of building something lasting that benefits not just the individual, but the collective, such as family or community. And I think it's fair to say that an extensive home project is an example of something tangible and lasting that benefits the family, right? So the 10 of Pentacles seems apt. And I want to take this opportunity to differentiate this card from the 6 of Cups that we saw in the previous spread. The Six of Cups also has to do with community and family foundations, but because it is the suit of cups, it approaches those themes with the faculty of emotion, which tied in really well with the nostalgic mood of the last text. The Ten of Pentacles is the suit of pentacles, so it's grounded earth energy, which matches much better with the subject matter of this text excerpt, which really goes to show how intentional it looks like the tarot is being with selecting its cards. For the most part. The next card is the Devil, which we've seen before. It talks about materialism and some other pretty negative things, right? Attachment, addictions, etc. None of these themes is apparent in the text or reasonably inferred by the reader, right? So it looks like, again, we got only 1 out of the 2 tarot cards correct, making this one of our weaker readings since we got only 2 out of the 3 oracle correct. Text number 10 reads, "Together we can solve your surface sterilization challenges. Surface microbial contamination can shut down your production line. To keep things moving, partner with Xenon, the global leader in pulsed light technology. Our proven solutions provide fast, greater than 5 log pathogen reduction to ensure surface sterilization. Over the years, we've helped countless end user and integrator clients develop precise solutions for their specific needs. You know your product, we know pulsed light. Let's work together to solve your product or packaging sterilization challenges." And for the oracle, we got Mercury in Aquarius in the 7th house. We can see here that Mercury is the planet of communication and intellect. It represents communication, intellect, reasoning, and adaptability. It also influences skills related to trade, negotiation, etc. Aquarius we've seen before as well, right? It has to do with intellectual stimulation and technological advancements. Looking at astrology.com, we can be a little more precise about Mercury in Aquarius. We see here that the sciences are the frequent stomping grounds of these individuals. Remember the last time we saw Aquarius was in text number 7, right? Which was about ellipsometry. It was another scientific text, right? So just drawing home the point here that Mercury in Aquarius has a very scientific bent to it. And the 7th house is the house of partnerships, including business alliances. So in the combined effects, we see intellectual partnerships. With Mercury in the 7th house, there is a strong emphasis on intellectual and communicative relationships. You are likely to seek partners with whom you can have stimulating conversations and mental connections. Or put differently, Mercury in the 7th house in Aquarius can result in partnerships based on intellectual interests, especially science. Which I think is very apt for this text, because it's not just about scientific endeavors. It has very much to do with partnerships in science, right? Together we can solve your surface sterilization challenges. Partner with Xenon. We've helped countless clients, right? You know your product, we know pulsed light. So this looks like a knockout for the oracle, I think, right? The tarot is even more interesting. For the tarot, we got the Queen of Swords and the Tower. ChatGPT provides the following information about the Queen of Swords. It says that it's an air element representing intellect, communication, and reason, and that it is the suit of swords, which is associated with the mind, logic, and decision-making, right? So these themes of Mercury, the mind, right? And specifically Mercury in Aquarius, representing a, rational, scientific type of intelligence, are showing up again. The Tower represents upheaval and destruction. Keywords for the Tower include collapse of structures and the breaking down of things. Now, tarot was developed for spiritual purposes, so the traditional symbolism has to do with, breaking down of illusions, etc. But I urge you not to let that throw you off, right? The root meaning of this card is destruction. Now, none of the combined meanings of these two cards is going to say anything about, surface sterilization, but the comprehensive interpretation that applies to us is patently clear, right? The idea of using intellect, Queen of Swords, to destroy something, the Tower. How does that apply to our text? Well, take a look at the textbook definition of sterilization. According to the NIH, sterilization is defined as a process of complete elimination or destruction of all forms of microbial life, right? The Tower, destruction, which is carried out by various physical and chemical methods. Queen of Swords, intellect, right? Science. So I'm a little blown away, I gotta say, that something so technical was captured so precisely with these tools. This was another knockout for both the Oracle and the Tarot. Okay, so I'm going to review these outcomes in summary, judging them based mainly on precision. We're going to look at how closely, how specifically, how indisputably did the instruments describe the feature of the text that it decided to catch on to. We'll rate the outcomes as poor, acceptable, good, very good, great, and excellent. I'll begin with the outcomes I consider excellent, which were number 2, 7, and 10. These entries demonstrated high precision. For number 2, we noted that the Oracle communicates the idea of emotional depth regarding financial matters. This is imparted by the deep Venus and Pisces energy along with the second house's material focus. So the outcome not only addresses the material aspects of the text, but also the emotional ones. And with that level of precision, it becomes harder to dismiss the outcome as mere coincidence. Similarly, in the Tarot, we see the Two of Cups and the Three of Pentacles, which reinforce the duality of the text. The Two of Cups signifies deep emotional bonds with its water energy, while the Three of Pentacles relates to collaboration in material pursuits, earth energy. Together, they underscore the nuanced nature of the text, solidifying number 2 as excellent. For number 7, our interpretation of the Oracle revealed a revolutionary drive in intellectual or innovative pursuits, as well as confident, passionate leadership in these areas. Both ideas are distinct and unambiguous, and both are easily linked to the text, backed by strong evidence. The Tarot was terrific too, picking up on a weird little part of the text, and the idea of expanding on existing accomplishments, but the outcome applies very unmistakably, right? There were 2 distinct places where that idea shows up in the text, as we discussed. So this is another excellent spread. In number 10, we define the Oracle outcome as intellectual scientific partnerships. This is exceptional because it encapsulates both the scientific and the collaborative aspects. So again, with that level of precision, it becomes harder to say that we got this outcome by chance. And the Tarot was remarkable as well. The definition of sterilization that we examined aligns extremely well with the intellectual qualities of the Queen of Swords and the destructive characteristics of the Tower. Thus, number 10 also ranks as excellent. Alright, in the great category, you already know I gotta start with number 8. The Oracle here yielded a very precise outcome, Jupiter in Cancer in the second house. If it had rendered something like Jupiter in Taurus, the theme of abundance would still have been conveyed. Jupiter in Taurus has to do with traditional financial material abundance, which is a theme that applies quite well to the text. But the outcome would have lacked the specificity that Jupiter in Cancer, which speaks to the abundance of a loving and supportive family, offers. So it's much more unmistakably relevant to the text, right? The second house complements both interpretations with Cancer and Aries in the sign placement. In the tarot, we got the Six of Cups and Five of Swords. I described in the subsequent analysis for number 9 that the Six of Cups is a very fitting card for this text due to its emotional and nostalgic significance. However, as I discussed, that Five of Swords really kind of crapped on the reading, dropping this reading down from an excellent to a great. My remaining great outcomes are number 3 and number 5. I'm going to look at them together because both discuss transformation, but they do so in markedly different ways. Number 3 emphasizes transformation through self-love. That's why we see Venus in the planet position. While number 5 focuses on seeking independence, which is why we have Uranus in the planetary position. The secondary house signifier in number 5 points to travel in foreign lands, enhancing the precision of that outcome. And additionally, we identified a covert energy in number 5, stemming from the Uranus and Scorpio combination, which applies very well to the text. In the tarot for number 5, we got Death and Five of Cups, which speaks to transforming sadness and moving on, which is a great way of describing this text excerpt, but also probably 100 other things, right? There's nothing in the tarot that is super specific to this text. I do like how well the bleak imagery of the Five of Cups aligns with the idea of a long, dark winter, and the symbolism of the remaining 2 upright cups in that card does relate really well to the text's hopeful message of seeing light at the end of the tunnel, right? That perspective shift we talked about in the analysis. If, for example, we had seen something like the Sun card alongside the Five of Cups, I would think, you know what, this is describing the juxtaposition between the 2 environments referenced in the text. This is pretty unmistakably characteristic of the text excerpt. But we don't see anything like that. And like I said, death works very well, just not excellently. The tarot for number 3 was great as well. The Six of Pentacles and Eight of Cups describe someone walking away from a situation that doesn't serve them in search of something more fulfilling. This energy is pretty specific and speaks really well to the text's message of being kind to yourself and abandoning stigma. The only slight concern I have is that those are 2 independent ideas that show up in different places in the text, right? Be kind to yourself, Six of Pentacles, walk away from stigma, Eight of Cups. And indeed, both of these cards are terrific independently, but they don't necessarily work together to communicate a joint idea as well as the outcomes in, for example, number 2 or number 7 did. In those outcomes, the 2 cards join together in a way such that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, which didn't happen here. And that's fine because the symbolism of the individual cards are so clearly applicable to the text, right? They appear verbatim in the excerpt. But it does kind of take away from the intentionality that we can ascribe to the outcomes. But I might be splitting hairs here. Number 3 could very well be an excellent, to be honest. In the very good category, I have number 4, for which the oracle was very precise. We interpreted the oracle as 2 distinct outcomes. One was this idea of being critical yet visionary, which is formed from the combination of revolutionary Uranus in the planet position and detail-oriented Virgo in the sign position. And that idea applies very well to the text's message of observing something through an unconventional lens. We also saw the idea of someone embracing a scrutinizing and fastidious self-concept, which again ties into the main takeaway of the text pretty unmistakably. So the oracle is great. The tarot is what takes this text from a great to a very good. In the tarot, we see the Two of Pentacles and Nine of Cups. First of all, the Two of Pentacles does speak to adaptability, but this card typically symbolizes adaptability as the quality of being able to adjust to new conditions, not the capacity to be modified for a new use or purpose, which is how it's used in the text. Furthermore, the Nine of Cups does speak to enjoyment, but it speaks more so to fulfillment in the sense of the realization of desires and dreams, and enjoyment in the sense of being happy with one's self, not the enjoyment that comes from beholding something fulfilling. And it probably sounds like I'm splitting hairs again, but these small inconsistencies in nuance and specificity contribute to the criticism that, maybe it's a coincidence that these particular cards emerged. Lastly, just like in number 3, the cards do well independently to point to distinct areas in the text, but they don't really jointly form a single cohesive idea, again taking away from the perceived intentionality of these outcomes. But still, the words associated with these cards do show up verbatim in the text, right? Adaptability and enjoyment. So it's not all that debatable, right? And so overall, this is still a very good outcome. Okay, in the good category, we have number 1 and number 6. For number 1, we said that the oracle here is talking about materialistic personal comforts, which is a fine way to describe this text, but the reason why I don't rank this higher in retrospect is because one can argue that the text is not so much about materialistic personal comforts as it is about luxurious personal comforts. There is a difference between materialism and luxury. You can enjoy luxury without being a slave to material experiences. Now, looking at this text, it advertises yacht-style cruising. Cruising itself is so wasteful. I can only imagine how over-the-top yacht-style cruising must be, right? So, it's like, this is materialistic, I know this is materialistic, even the company is probably very aware that they are selling something really over-the-top here, but that's just not how the text presents itself. The text speaks of elegance and comfort, not extravagance and hedonism. So if the oracle wanted to capture the main idea of the text, luxury, there are ways of communicating that idea without editorializing the facts for us. We just saw Jupiter and Taurus speaking to luxury, right? Jupiter and Taurus in the 4th house would have been a perfectly fine way of characterizing this text. So all the cards work together to impart a cohesive idea, but that idea is just not a very precise description of the text. The tarot also presents challenges. In the tarot we see the Devil card, which really illustrates the repulsive qualities of materialism with its depravity and vice, which again doesn't align very well with the text's tone. Furthermore, the Six of Swords does symbolize travel, as we saw in the original analysis, but it conveys more of a need to escape rather than the leisurely cruise implied by the text. I don't think it's a coincidence that the figures in this card are literally in a boat, which, ties in really well with the text having to do with the cruise. I think the tarot was being intentional, but again, it's just not precise. So in retrospect, I would rate this outcome as just good. I can see what the instruments were trying to do, I just can't defend it very well against criticism. The second good one is number 6. For number 6, as we discussed, the oracle's placement of Leo feels misaligned. Additionally, while Venus works really well with the 4th and 9th houses to impart ideas surrounding self-nurturing and learning deeper truths, in retrospect, a planet like Neptune would have been an even better choice due to its natural associations with sensitivity and boundarylessness. Again, it would have just yielded a more specific outcome, highlighting the intentionality of the instruments. Tarot is perfectly fine. As I pointed out in the analysis, the 2 cards do a good job of communicating the idea that you're just trucking along, right? You're not charging headfirst into anything, you're just taking it one day at a time. So overall, I would say this is a high good outcome, but not quite very good. Finally, number 9 was our acceptable one. Neptune and Taurus here yielded an extremely specific outcome that was applicable to the text. But as we discussed, the 10th house isn't very apropos. It doesn't completely throw out the reading like the Leo card does in number 6 or the 5 of Swords does in number 8, but it doesn't work very well either. In the tarot, I love the 10 of Pentacles. We talked about how appropriate the element of that card is, right? Earth energy referring to building something stable, and the number 10 referring to something long-lasting and enduring. But like we said, the Devil card just has no place in this reading. So with 2 out of the 3 Oracle and 1 out of the 2 Tarot correct, this was probably our weakest reading. However, I will say the parts that do work really well, which counts for a lot. Well, that wraps up our video. Our objective today was to address the step 0 question. Can we say there's some credibility to this divination thing? My hypothesis was that divination would outperform chance with at least 6 out of the 10 outcomes rated very good or better in accurately describing the hidden texts. And our results support that hypothesis. 7 of our samples did very good, great, or excellent at divining the hidden text. Only 3 were acceptable or good. So I think these results at least merit further inquiry. Here we have a very affordable tool that seems to perform such an incredible task as revealing hidden information with a pretty high level of accuracy. At the very least, it's something worthy of continuing to investigate. It shouldn't be laughed off or dismissed so easily. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel for related content.